Hey guys, George Thomas here in Lviv, which is Ukraine's largest city in the western part of the country. A new polling that just came out today showed that 62% of Ukrainians want to join NATO. And that is actually up from December when it was 55%. And an overwhelming number of Ukrainians in this new poll said that they want to join the European Union. Look, this is what's happened. Since Russia's invasion of eastern Ukraine back in 2014, Ukrainians have become more and more anti-Russian. The overwhelming majority of Ukrainians are not happy with the situation. And the other point is that, Russia's economy is in the doldrums. To amass such a number of troops on the border is costing the Russian economy so much money. So what is the calculus? What is Putin's end game? I think war or no war, he has miscalculated on a number of factors. Number one is that I don't think he realized that NATO would come together. He thought that NATO was fractured, that the Germans, the French would be against imposing any tough sanctions, for example, on Russia's oil industry. But they've come together. Also, they've deployed more troops. This is one thing that Russia said that they didn't want close to their border. And what we've seen in the last couple of weeks as Moscow has ratcheted up their belligerence, NATO is deploying more troops. The United States has deployed more troops to the eastern flank. They've deployed more troops to Poland. And so, in one sense, I don't think Moscow anticipated this sort of united front against him. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens. So he has two options. One is to significantly draw back and stand down, which would be a huge blow to his prestige. Or secondly, that he launches a massive invasion. And that is going to cost him dearly, not just in money, but also in lives, because Ukrainians are fierce warriors, and they're going to protect their nation at all costs, especially when you're dealing with a country that is increasingly anti-Russian and more pro-Western. Continue to keep updated on the YouTube channel as well as our social media platforms. You can follow me on Instagram as well as on Facebook. I'm George Thomas reporting for CBN News. Hey guys, George Thomas here with CBN News. It's Friday evening here in Lviv, Ukraine, in the western part of the country. And as you can see, bumper-to-bumper traffic. Everybody's headed home for the weekend. You're probably watching the news in this region. The latest reports are that Russia now has between 169,000 to 200,000 troops amassed on Ukraine's border. Dramatic jump in the numbers. Also, you've been hearing for the last couple of weeks this term false flag, this idea that the United States and NATO allies have been accusing Moscow of coming up with some kind of an excuse, a false excuse, pretext to invade Ukraine. And it appears that Russia has its reason. And the reason is that according to Vladimir Putin, in his press conference with the Belarusian president, he alleges that there are mass human rights violations taking place against ethnic Russians in the eastern part of Ukraine. Keep in mind, this is the same excuse that Moscow used when they wanted to invade Georgia back in 2008. It's the same excuse that they used in 2014 when they wanted to invade the eastern part of Ukraine. Ukraine officials are obviously vehemently denying this, that there are no human rights violations against ethnic Russians in the country, in the eastern part of the country. And then today, this evening, the head of the separatist movement, the Russian-backed separatist movement in Donetsk, has asked close to about 2.2 million Russians who live there to evacuate. And obviously this is raising alarm bells, because there is a sense that Russia is getting ready to move under the pretext, this false flag, that ethnic Russians are enduring human rights violations. In fact, Putin has, over the last couple of days, even thrown around the term that there is genocide taking place against Russians, ethnic Russians in eastern Ukraine. My sense, based on history, is that that Russia now has its pretext and has its reason for going into Ukraine. I say keep an eye on February 20th. I've been saying this for quite some time. It's the end of the Beijing Olympic Games. It's also the end of the Belarus military exercises. And then more importantly, it marks the 8 years. It's 8 years on February 20th when Russia invaded eastern Ukraine. So keep an eye on that date.
Today,
in the meantime,
I made two
please
vital
pray.
calls, as I've been making for some months now. Two vital calls that on the situation in Russia and Ukraine. The first was to a bipartisan group of members of Congress who are currently representing the United States, along with Vice President Harris at the Munich Security Conference. The second was the latest in a series of calls over the past many months with the heads of state of our NATO allies and the European Union, to bring them up to date on what the United States thinks is the current state of affairs and what's likely to happen in Ukraine in the coming days, to ensure that we continue to remain in lockstep, that is, the European Union and NATO. Despite Russia's efforts to divide us at home and abroad, I can affirm that has not happened. The overwhelming message of on both calls was one of unity, determination, and resolve. I shared with all of those on the calls what we know about a rapidly escalating crisis in Ukraine. Over the last few days, we've seen reports of a major uptick in violations of the ceasefire by Russian-backed fighters attempting to provoke Ukraine in the Donbass. For example, a shelling of a Ukrainian kindergarten yesterday, which Russia has falsely asserted was carried out by Ukraine. We also continue to see more and more disinformation being pushed out to the Russian public, including Russian-backed separatists, claiming that Ukraine is planning to launch a massive offensive attack in the Donbass. Well, look, there is simply no evidence to these assertions, and it defies basic logic to believe the Ukrainians would choose this moment, with well over 150,000 troops arrayed on its borders, to escalate a year-long conflict. Russia's state media also continues to make phony allegations of a genocide taking place in the Donbass, and push fabricated claims warning about Ukraine's attack on Russia without any evidence. That's just what I'm sure Ukraine's thinking of doing, attacking Russia. All of these are consistent with the playbook the Russians have used before, to set up a false justification to act against Ukraine. This is also in line with the pretext scenarios that the United States and our allies and partners have been warning about for weeks. Throughout these tense moments, the Ukrainian forces have shown great judgment and, I might add, restraint. They refused to allow the Russians to bait them into war, But the fact remains, Russian troops currently have Ukraine surrounded from Belarus along the Russian border and with Ukraine to the Black Sea in the south and all of its border. You know, look, we have reason to believe the Russian forces are planning to and intend to attack Ukraine in the coming week, in the coming days. We believe that they will target Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, a city of 2.8 million innocent people. We're calling out Russia's plans loudly and repeatedly, not because we want a conflict, but because we're doing everything in our power to remove any reason that Russia may give to justify invading Ukraine and prevent them from moving. Make no mistake, if Russia pursues its plans, it will be responsible for a catastrophic and needless war of choice. The United States and our allies are prepared to defend every inch of NATO territory from any threat to our collective security as well. We also will not send troops in to fight in Ukraine, but we will continue to support the Ukrainian people. This past year, the United States provided a record amount of security assistance to Ukraine to bolster its defensive, $650 million from Javelin missiles to ammunition. We also previously provided $500 million in humanitarian aid and economic support for Ukraine. And earlier this week, we also announced an additional sovereign loan guarantee of up to $1 billion to strengthen Ukraine's economic resilience. But the bottom line is this: the United States and our allies and partners will support the Ukrainian people. We will hold Russia accountable for its actions. The West is united and resolved. We're ready to impose severe sanctions on Russia if it further invades Ukraine. But I say again, Russia can still choose diplomacy. It is not too late to de-escalate and return to the negotiating table. Last night, Russia agreed that Secretary of State Blinken and Foreign Minister Lavrov should meet on February 24th in Europe. But if Russia takes military action before that date, we'll be clear that they have slammed the door shut on diplomacy. They will have chosen war, and they will pay a steep price for doing so, not only from the sanctions that we and our allies will impose on Russia, but the moral outrage the rest of the world will visit upon them. You know, there are many issues that divide our nation and our world, but standing up to Russian aggression is not one of them. The American people are united. Europe is united. The transatlantic community is united. Our political parties in this country are united. The entire free world is united. Russia has a choice between war and all the suffering it will bring, or diplomacy that will make a future safer for everyone. Now I'm happy to take a few questions. Nancy from Bloomberg.
Thank you so much, sir. Do you think that it is wise for President Zelensky to leave Ukraine if an invasion is as imminent as the U.S. says it is?
That's a judgment for him to make, and a determination as to whether or not. I've spoken with Zelensky a dozen times, maybe more, I don't know. And it's in the pursuit of a diplomatic solution, it may not be it may be the wise choice, but it's his decision.
And do you have any indication about whether President Putin has made a decision on whether to invade? Do you feel confident that he hasn't made that decision already?
As of this moment, I'm convinced he's made the decision. We have reason to believe that.
There seems to be a unanimity, a spirit to do between the United States and Europe to do some sanctions, a comprehensive sanctions, but is everyone on board with the exact same sanctions that you want to do?
Yes. There will be some slight differences, but there'll be more add-ons than subtractions.
And President Putin is going to oversee some nuclear drills this weekend. How do you see that happening? What's your reaction to that, sir? Thank you.
Well, I don't think he is remotely contemplating using nuclear weapons. But I do think I think he is focused on trying to convince the world that he has the ability to change the dynamics in Europe in a way that he cannot. But I don't how much of it is a cover for just saying we're just doing exercises, and there's more than that. I just can't. It's hard to read his mind. I'll take one.
You are convinced that President Putin is going to invade Ukraine. Is that what you just said a few moments ago?
Yes, I did. Yes.
So is diplomacy off the table then?
No. Until he does, diplomacy is always a possibility.
What reason do you have to believe he's considering that option at all?
We have a significant intelligence capability. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.